Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise in support of a bill from the member Langley Aldergrove. Bill C-342 would amend the Excise Act so that the government cannot collect GST or HST on provincial carbon pricing systems. Last year, the Prime Minister imposed a national floor price on carbon that will require all provinces and territories to have some form of carbon pricing by the year 2018. British Columbia, Alberta, Ontario, and Quebec have already introduced carbon pricing systems, Mr. Speaker. Most other provinces are working to do the same before the 2018 deadline. The Liberals have claimed that putting a price on carbon pollution is the most efficient way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And before I go on, I want to remind everyone of a recent report tabled by the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development. It is titled Progress on Reducing Greenhouse Gases. And it concludes that the Minister's Department did not make progress towards meeting Canada's commitment to reduce greenhouse gases. Ooh, surprise. This brings into the question the effectiveness of a carbon pricing scheme. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, that the Liberals did not introduce carbon pricing to reduce the emissions. They introduced it because they need fund their excessive spending habits. Now, I believe Canadians are willing to pay their fair share of taxes, but this government is demanding so much money from hard-working Canadians that soon there won't be any more money left for them to take. Despite promising that carbon pricing would be revenue neutral, Mr. Speaker, the Liberals' 2016 budget projected a 21% increase in GST revenues from 2016 to 2021. Why? The GST rates didn't change in those calculations, but you know what did? A massive growth in taxable consumption on the carbon pricing. The carbon tax is just that, simply another tax. The carbon pricing scheme isn't revenue neutral because it increases costs down the line and are increasing the cost of GST and HST on the consumers and businesses. That is exactly why I believe this bill is necessary, and I thank the member for bringing it forward. If the government wants to keep its promise to make carbon pricing revenue neutral, they need to support this bill. Otherwise, they will be taking billions from hard-working Canadians because of this tax on a tax. Aren't Canadians being taxed enough? This is just another Liberal grab designed to make Canadians pay for the Prime Minister's out-of-control spending habits and the legacy of his deficits that our grandchildren and children will have to pay. Consumers and businesses are finding it more and more difficult to survive under the Liberals. They say that it will force businesses to be more environmentally friendly because it will raise their operating costs. But guess what? That cost is just passed down to the consumer. If you want to take your family on a Christmas vacation, it's going to be more expensive because airlines have passed costs down to the consumers. It hasn't changed how many gallons of fuel it takes to get from one city to the next. If it does, it's probably because they have invested in more fuel-efficient technology. But that is something that is already in their interest because it saves them money. They don't need an imposed carbon tax to tell them to be more efficient. They are already trying that. A carbon tax targets emissions that are generally from burning fuels like coal, petroleum, and natural gas in the hopes of discouraging their uses. While these fuels are produced emissions, they also need to drive our cars, heat our homes, and produce our electricity. The problem with this is it doesn't matter how much these fuels cost us, we still need to consume them every day. And winter is coming on, Mr. Speaker. It doesn't matter how much a fill-up at the gas tank is, many of us still have to drive. I'm 8.5 hours from one end of my riding to the other. I'm definitely not going to walk. And it doesn't matter how much our electricity bills go up, we still have to heat our homes. I have to plug my vehicle in the wintertime. I won't get back to the house. My riding of Yellowhead is full of oil and gas fields. It's not like in those questionable documentaries where you see a massive hole is dug in the earth, Mr. Speaker, with no sign of life for miles. The oil and gas leases are scattered throughout the forests and on the farmland, and are most often just a small teardrop of gravel with a small building or shack on top of the well. Each company has an operator that has to check on each of these leases every day to be sure they are functioning properly. Additionally, they have to bring in water trucks, and other serviceable vehicles to maintain these leases. This is all necessary to ensure compliance with environmental regulations and the safe functioning of wells. Even though carbon tax makes it more expensive to operate and drive to each one of these leases every day, Mr. Speaker, the companies can't decrease their safety oversight and well maintenance. They have to pass the cost onto the consumer at the pump, you and me. As well, a carbon tax is a huge hit to Canadian farm sector, which relies on these fuels to plant the crops that grow the food that we eat. CIBC Bank noted that some experts say the total additional cost to a farm would be $6 an acre. If you planted 1,000 acres of oats, that's $6,000 more in fuel cost to that farmer. When the cost of the farmer goes up, so does the cost of the food to the consumers. Again, we're just paying again. I also want to draw your attention to another issue. I've said that the cost from carbon pricing is passed down to the consumer, making the cost of living more expensive. But some businesses are forced to absorb the blow at the bottom line, jeopardizing the future of these businesses and jobs that they provide, all while doing nothing to impact on their emissions. For example, in the auto body industry, companies do not set their own prices. If a person gets his car into an accident and needs to get it fixed, their insurance company decides how much it should cost and dictates that to the auto body shop. They tell the auto body shop how much to charge, even though the insurance company doesn't know the overhead costs of that body shop. This is unfortunately the way insurance systems is set up. And speaking with one of the owners near my riding, I learned that the suppliers have passed the cost of carbon pricing onto his company. But the insurance companies dictate how much he can charge, and there's been no increase provided to offset the cost of carbon tax. It's out of his pocket, the bottom line. Considering that about 90% of his work comes from insurance, his operating costs have decreased by 12%, and that comes completely off his bottom line. What does that mean? It means choke growth, maybe staff cuts. When the Alberta carbon pricing took effect in January, it just so happens that there was an increase in gas prices at the same time. The gas bill for this same person's shop went from $500 a month to almost $1,600 a month. He went to his MLA to find out why, and found out that GST collected on top of the provincial carbon tax was the major factor. Mr. Speaker, that is exactly why this bill is important. Small businesses and consumers alike are seeing the costs skyrocket under this Liberal government. As representatives, it's our duty and our responsibility to ensure that each of our constituents can afford their groceries, can afford to heat their homes in the middle of January, and can afford to keep providing jobs for their communities. No one should ever have to be let go from a job because their company is being taxed to death. The Liberal government will collect billions in new tax dollars as a result of charging GST on their mandatory price on carbon. The shameless tax grab is unfair to Canadians, and it's not what the Prime Minister promised to keep the price on carbon revenue neutral. We'll be right done. I want to thank the member from Langley Aldergrove for bringing this incredibly important bill forward and to our attention. And I call on those sitting across from me today and to all of their colleagues to support this bill and help your Prime Minister keep his promise to Canadians. Thank you.